PR Connections Radio presents.
Welcome to Vegas Hockey Hub here on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Rachiele. And on this edition of Vegas Hockey Hub here on PR Connections Radio, where it is about time, it is a good time to be a hockey fan. If you're a Vegas Golden Knights fan, I know you are ready. You are looking forward to what's about to happen next. And that is what our topic is going to be tonight. And that is our 2024 Stanley Cup Playoff prediction. And there's going to be a lot of stuff to break down and really discuss here on this show. And this is going to be a fantastic episode of Vegas Hockey Hub. So when it comes to Vegas Hockey Hub, here on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media, check out all the fantastic content we have on the network, including Vegas Hockey Hub, about a dozen shows on here. So go check out the network, subscribe to the YouTube channel, like the videos. It supports the network a lot. Also go to our social media platforms at Vegas Hockey Hub. And that way that you can help us out. We're on all social media platforms, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. We are everywhere at Vegas Hockey Hub. And if you want to follow your host, I am on social media as well on all major platforms at Ian J. Rachiele. And before breaking down the content, I do have to say props to our sponsor on PR Connections Radio, paidperletter.com. So if you want to go to the website and then use the tag Uncle Dan to get started today. So paidperletter.com/Uncle Dan to get started today. So if you want to get paid per letter, go to their website. We appreciate them being a sponsor of PR Connections Radio. Now, getting into the actual Stanley Cup playoffs, and man, this is going to be a lot of fun and exciting stuff to talk about on this episode. So much we're going to go over. Now, the way we're going to do this is we're going to start with the Eastern Conference. We'll break it down, and then we will get to the Western Conference. Because with your Vegas Golden Knights, and with it being Vegas Hockey Hub, we understand that the Western Conference is going to be the main key. So we're going to save that for last and really go over the Western Conference in really good detail here on Vegas Hockey Hub. Now, the first matchup that we are going to be breaking down is the Atlantic Division, and that is going to be a matchup between in-state rivals, and that is the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Florida Panthers. Now, Florida, they're a team made to the Stanley Cup Final last year, losing to Vegas on that end, and they're going to be trying to go back to the Stanley Cup Final for the second year in a row. They had a fantastic season this year. Sergei Bobrovsky doing an incredible job in net. Them getting Aaron Ekblad back from injury, that is a good detail for Florida. And on terms of offensive production, their top nine has been elite this season in Florida. Now, the defense is a bit suspect and actually could be a soft part of Florida is their defense overall, their defensive pairings, and them kind of, helping out and bailing out Sergei Bobrovsky if he has a bad night. But overall, Florida has a really strong roster. They have a good top nine. Their first defensive pairing is solid, and they have one of the best goaltenders over the past two seasons in Sergei Bobrovsky. But let's not count out Tampa Bay here. Okay, this is a Tampa Bay team that has won back-to-back Stanley Cups only a couple of years ago. They have a good amount of talent from that roster who they did win cups with. And you still have Andrei Vasilevsky, who is a elite quality tier goaltender still in net in Tampa Bay. On defense, Mikhail Sergachev, him coming back from injury, that's good news for Tampa Bay. You still have guys like Victor Hedman. You still have some defensemen still left on that team from that cup run a couple of years ago. And in terms of forwards, Nikita Kucherov, he is in the conversation for Art Ross, for Hart Trophy, for all of this stuff. Nikita Kucherov has been a big need for Tampa Bay. And then you have guys to fill out the rest of the roster. You have Braden Point. You have guys like, for example, Steven Stamkos, still the face of the franchise from when they drafted him. And then you have guys to fill out the middle, like Nick Paul. You have Brandon Hagel, some good quality players there. So for Florida and Tampa Bay, this is the first matchup there when it comes to the Atlantic Division. And you have the in-state rivalry, and it's going to be really good to see both of these guys go back and forth on that situation. Now, moving over to the other matchup on the Atlantic side, you have the Boston Bruins and the Toronto Maple Leafs. This has been a series we have seen plenty of times over the last decade. They have been iconic nail-biters over this time period. I mean, a first-round matchup between Boston and Toronto, you can count on that every single year. It's been like clockwork ever since Gary Bettman created the playoff format we have now. Now, Toronto Maple Leafs, who I wrote an article on the sportsangle.com, I talked about them potentially winning a Stanley Cup. Do they have a cup-winning roster? Their top six is elite. Okay, Austin Matthews, he's putting up 69 goals this year. Nice. And then you also have John Tavares, William Nylander, Mitch Marner. There's so much talent on that top six with Toronto that they have a really solid club. Their clubhouse has done pretty well. Sheldon Keefe, he's been able to kind of hold it steady in terms of coaching. The defense is a bit suspect. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. Morgan Rielly is a really good defenseman, but the rest of the defense in Toronto, it is a question mark there. Now, the goaltending, when Ilya Samsonov is on it, man, he is on it for sure. But there has been times where he has not been on a 100% condition. Everybody remembers at the beginning of the year, Ilya Samsonov actually got sent down and put on waivers by Toronto. And then he had to earn himself back into the organization and become the starting goaltender again. So that's a bit of a question mark there. When it comes to Toronto Maple Leafs, the goaltending, that's to me their weakest point at this moment in time. Now, the Boston Bruins, a team that had the record last year for the most wins in a regular season before getting bounced by Florida in the first round. They're hungry. They want revenge. They have a top 10 player in terms of David Pastrnak. He is an incredible player for Boston. You still have Brad Marchand. Their top 9 has some good quality players in it. But the defense is something you do have to mention because you have two good defensive pairings in Boston, but I do question what they're going to do as the playoffs go on. How are they going to be able to do what they need to do longer and longer and longer into the playoffs? So the defense is a bit suspect, but the one quality Boston has over Toronto is struggling in terms of goaltending. Boston has two quality goaltenders. I mean, Jeremy Swayman and Linus Ullmark have been a quality duo. Their battery out there in Boston has been incredible the past 2 seasons. That's really where the edge is in terms of goaltending, but the Toronto Maple Leafs will be able to outscore them, and their defense, like I said, the first defensive pairing is elite. The rest of it, you do have to question there moving forward with Boston and Toronto on that end. Now, getting over to the New York Rangers and Washington Capitals. I mean, this is a Washington Capitals team that went on an insane run just to even make the playoffs. Alex Ovechkin scoring goals left and right. You also have some good veteran forwards who have stepped up for Washington as of late. But that's the problem you kind of have in the playoffs, though. The defense, it's okay. The goaltending, you have Darcy Kemper. He is a Stanley Cup winning goaltender. He won with the Avs a couple of years ago. Charlie Lindgren, a good backup goalie there. But the problem the Capitals are going to have is the age of their guys. The Washington Capitals have one of the oldest rosters in the NHL. And when you go up against a New York Rangers team that is just loaded with talent, it really makes me question how are they going to perform in terms of Game 5, Game 6, potential Game 7. How is Washington and their age and their legs when you get older, how are they going to hold up against a New York Rangers team that has a lot more young guys than Washington does? Where vice versa, New York Rangers, there's a reason why they're the President's Trophy winner. Because this is a New York Rangers team that has been stacked this season. Artemi Panarin, absolute great player for the New York Rangers. Then you also fill it out by having guys like Mika Zibanejad. There's some good players like Chris Kreider. New York Rangers did a solid job this season at filling out the roster. Their depth is one of the best in the NHL. And the defense, you have Fox, you have Miller. There is a lot of good guys. They have about 5 deep in terms of defensemen with the New York Rangers. The only question mark you may have with the New York Rangers is what I would like to call the President's Trophy situation. If you are the winner of the President's Trophy, do you have a setback in the playoffs? Is that real? Is it legit when it comes to being the number 1 team heading into the playoffs? It feels like there's a jinx there. It's mental, whatever it is. If you have that trophy, it seems like there's just a black cloud, just a dark gray shadow over you. And we'll see what happens there with the New York Rangers. And then the final matchup in the first round for the Eastern Conference, you have the Carolina Hurricanes and the New York Islanders. Carolina Hurricanes, one of the best all-around teams in the NHL. Every single line has a form of production on the forwards. Their defense, they have done really excellent with filling out the defense and getting 3 quality defensive pairings in Carolina. And then the goaltending, they have some good quality, 2 quality goaltenders in net for Carolina. So overall, Carolina, one of the best squads heading into the playoffs. New York Islanders, this is an organization who went on a run in the second half of the year, managed to get themselves into the playoffs. Their coach, Patrick Waugh, he was there, added towards the middle of the season and helped the New York Islanders get to the playoffs. So good job by Patrick Waugh. His first playoff appearance since the Avalanche when he coached them in the mid-2010s. So New York Islanders, they're kind of a feel-good story. They have some good talent. You have Matthew Barzal. There is some guys you could put on that roster that do have some quality situations there. I do have to question the defense, though. The defense is something that is a bit suspect, and you could actually look at it as a negative if you want to see it that way. So my prediction for the Eastern Conference, round 1, I have Florida defeating Tampa Bay in 5 games. This is really not going to be a series for me. Florida has an overall better roster from top to bottom. Tampa Bay, yes, it's starting to catch up with them. I think the dynasty's over. And more importantly, this will be the second year in a row that Tampa Bay will be knocked out in the first round. Toronto versus Boston, 7-game series. Okay, easily will be a 7-game series between Toronto and Boston. This is going to be probably the best series to watch in the first round. But I have Toronto winning in 7 games over Boston, doing something they haven't done in decades, and that is beat Boston in the playoffs. I just really look at the overall roster, and I really break it down and say that Toronto has a better overall roster than Boston does in terms of hand-to-hand. The New York Rangers and the Washington Capitals, I will say this will be a 5-6 game series. I think Washington will probably win a game, maybe 2 in this situation, but New York Rangers are just so much better, and more importantly, they have so much more talent from top to bottom than the Washington Capitals do. So the New York Rangers, I have them winning in about 6 games. And then finally, the Carolina Hurricanes, I have them sweeping the New York Islanders. This will be a 4-0 situation. Carolina, just one of the best rosters in the Eastern Conference. They will make light work of the New York Islanders. So moving over to the second round of the Eastern Conference. Now, we're going to kick this off with a matchup that we saw last year, by the way, and that is Florida versus Toronto. So this is going to be a repeat of what we saw this past season, but more importantly, this is where the change is going to be. You have a Florida team that's no longer an 8 seed, a Toronto organization that's no longer has that cloud of never winning a playoff series over them. I mean, Toronto was so excited last season that they beat Tampa Bay that they kind of fell flat in the second round. It felt like they just kind of gotten the wind out of their sails, and that second round was all they could do. This time, though, Toronto doesn't have that. They'll overtake Boston. Now they're going to go up against Florida, and this is going to be a great series. I mean, no doubt in my mind, this is going to be probably one of the best series we're going to see all playoff long, because this is going to be a back-and-forth battle. You're going to have defense versus defense, a good goalie matchup with Sergei Bobrovsky. If Ilya Samsonov does show up, that could be a quality matchup there. And the top 6 of Toronto going up against the top 9 in Florida, that's going to be an epic battle there. You have the physicality of Florida. You have the bruisers that Toronto has on their bottom 6. That's going to have a lot of intensity and physicality in this series as well. So Florida versus Toronto, that's going to be really interesting there. And then you have the New York Rangers and Carolina Hurricanes, and this is going to be a solid matchup here. If you really want to see some good old school hockey, where there's a lot of goaltending, good defense on either side, this will be a matchup to watch. You have a Carolina Hurricanes team that is built on endurance, a team that's built on making sure the defense is well built. And New York Rangers, you have arguably one of the best goaltenders in the NHL this past season in Igor Shesterkin, and this is a defense that they have 3 quality pairings with your New York Rangers out there. So this will be a matchup that I personally would love to see, because of how similar they were kind of built in terms of how they were kind of put together. The GM, the owner, the head coach, they're kind of built the same there. So getting into the second round of the Eastern Conference here on Vegas Hockey Hub, I'm your host, Ian Rachiele. And for round 2, I have the Toronto Maple Leafs beating Florida in 7 games. This will be a good slugfest, a good back-and-forth matchup there. But overall, Toronto in 7 games to beat Florida. And for the first time since 2002, the Toronto Maple Leafs will advance to the Eastern Conference Final. And then on the opposite side, I have Carolina beating New York in 7 games. I see both matchups in the Eastern Conference semifinals being a 7-game series, a brawling, grueling, back-and-forth series between Carolina and New York, and then Toronto and Florida. So that will be your Eastern Conference Final. My prediction here, Toronto versus Carolina in the Eastern Conference Final. That's what we're doing here. And then lastly, for the Eastern Conference Final, I already just said, come out and said it, Carolina versus Toronto. And this is going to be a tale of what do you care about more? All right, what part of hockey do you want more? Do you want elusive? Do you want explosive scoring? Do you want an offense that's just going to try to light up the lamp as much as humanly possible? Do you have one of the best goal scorers in the NHL in Austin Matthews, followed by Nylander, followed by Tavares, followed by Marner, followed by all of these guys that are going to help out Austin Matthews and make sure that he gets the puck on his stick? Or do you want some of that old school hockey? Do you want that defense, that goalie situation where you have 2 of these teams that are going to look at their goaltending situation and say, all right, when it comes to who's in net, when it's working in between the crease, who is going to be the matchup that we want more? So do you want defense or do you want offense? Do you want a 7-4 matchup, or would you like to have a 3-2 matchup in the third period? Because with Carolina, that's what you're really looking forward to. As Toronto, they try to use their explosiveness and their speed to get down to the opposite end of the rink every single time. So for Toronto and for Carolina, this is going to be a very good matchup. This is going to be a series where it's going to be a little bit of back and forth between both teams here. But I value defense. Defense wins championships in the NHL. People who've been watching hockey long enough knows that when it gets to the conference final and definitely in the Stanley Cup final, whose defense is better normally indicates who's going to win that matchup. So using that ideology and using what I just broke down here, in the Eastern Conference Final, I have in 6 games, 6 really good games, the Carolina Hurricanes, they will beat the Toronto Maple Leafs, and they will advance to the Stanley Cup Final for the first time since 2002. Now, the Carolina Hurricanes, the last time they went to the Stanley Cup Final, they lost to the Detroit Red Wings, the dynasty they were back in the late 90s, early 2000s. There was really nothing Carolina could do at that point, but this will be their first Stanley Cup Final appearance in over 20 years, and the second one as the Carolina Hurricanes since they relocated from Hartford. So your Eastern Conference champion will be Carolina, and that will be a really good matchup, a 6-game series between Toronto and Carolina. Now, moving over to the Western Conference, and this is going to be a lot of fun to talk about and really break down here on this show, as you will have the first matchup we're breaking down. We're going to get right into it. We're not going to shy away from it, and that will be your Vegas Golden Knights taking on the Dallas Stars. The Dallas Stars, who had the best record in the Western Conference, have had one of the strongest teams in the West from the beginning of the season, taking on the reigning, defending Stanley Cup champions, and that is your Vegas Golden Knights. Now, some people are going to remember that this is a rematch of the Western Conference Finals from last year. This is a rematch from what we saw this past season, and this is going to be a matchup where you're going to see the best of the best go at it. This is going to be where it really should have been a Western Conference Final rematch in the Western Conference Finals. We get the luxury and the leisure of having this matchup in the first round. What a treat for hockey fans. Now, Dallas and Vegas, you have certain strengths and negatives for this team. For Dallas, they have depth at every single position. If anybody saw the morning skate and the lines for Dallas, the fact that Jamie Benn is on line 3 should be an indicator of how strong their forward lines can be. The fact that the Dallas Stars have a top 9 that is among the best in the NHL, that is a strength for Dallas. The Dallas Stars defensively have 2 solid defensive pairings to start this out. The fact that you have Christopher Tanev, who you acquired from Calgary at the trade deadline, on your second defensive pairing alongside Lindell, this is going to be a really good matchup for Dallas. And more importantly, they have one of the best goaltenders in the NHL in Jake Ottinger coming into the playoffs and heading into this situation, trying to win a series for Dallas. But on the opposite end, you have the Vegas Golden Knights. And when this team is 100% healthy, when Vegas has everybody playing together, they have probably the best roster in all of hockey. The Vegas Golden Knights right now, if everyone comes back, and yes, we obviously know that Anthony Mantha, he is in a red jersey. He's not participating in full practice. We get that. But Petrangelo's coming back. Carrier's coming back. Stone's coming back. All of these guys are now coming back at the right time. Alex Pietrangelo, who had his appendix removed, that's why he actually missed all that time. We finally figured out and found out why he has been gone. Alex Pietrangelo, he will be back on your first defensive pairing alongside Noah Hannafin. And overall, this is going to be a matchup where Dallas and Vegas is going to be a grueling back-and-forth series, and it's going to be a matchup of this team who has one of the best rosters going up against this team that's one of the best rosters. That's going to be a fun matchup there. The Winnipeg Jets and Colorado Avalanche, I mean, there's really not much I can say about this matchup, except I think we know who's going to win this, okay? Like, no disrespect, but unless your goaltender can find a way to carry this team on his back, we know who's going to win this matchup. I mean, you have one of the best rosters from top to bottom going up against a team that's being helped by their goaltender. So the next matchup, you also have the Vancouver Canucks and the Nashville Predators. Vancouver Canucks, a really solid season. This is a team that we have really seen grow over the last couple of years. Then you have the Nashville Predators, who thanks to guys like Juuse Saros and the forwards on the top 6, they've been able to kind of get in there and find a way to win when it matters most. But the Cinderella story, will it last forever? I kind of doubt it. The Vancouver Canucks, they have a way better roster from tip to tail. So it'll be interesting to see what they do against Nashville in this series. And then you have Edmonton going up against LA. And to really keep this as brief and as simple as possible, look, Edmonton, you have 2 solid defensemen. Your goaltending is a bit suspect. Stuart Skinner, not the greatest goaltender in the NHL, but you have McDavid and you have Draisaitl. Can anybody else step up for Edmonton? Whereas LA, I like a few of their pieces right now. Like, their defense is a lot better than what Edmonton's is. Cam Talbot, who used to be in Edmonton at one point, I would trust him over Stuart Skinner if I had to put money down. So this is a matchup where, if Edmonton gets carried, if Edmonton gets carried by McDavid and Draisaitl, good for them. But it'll be curious to see what happens with Edmonton and LA in this matchup. Now, getting into the first round here, I have your Vegas Golden Knights beating the Dallas Stars in 7 games. This is going to be a grueling back-and-forth series, probably the second best matchup in the first round behind Boston and Toronto. But Vegas will find a way to prevail. They will persevere, and they will beat Dallas in 7 games. I have Vegas over Dallas. Colorado, they will beat Winnipeg in about 6 games. This will be a series where Connor Hellebuyck will win a game or 2, but overall, he won't be able to overcome McKinnon, Rantanen, Makar, and all of the fantastic talent that Colorado has on that roster. Vancouver and Nashville, I say that Soros will probably win a game, maybe 2 at the most, but Vancouver will be able to put away Nashville, end the Cinderella story, and move on. And then the Los Angeles Kings in a 7-game battle will overcome McDavid, overcome Draisaitl, and the Los Angeles Kings will beat the Edmonton Oilers in the first round and send home Edmonton crying and going back home. Now, moving over to the second round, you have the Vegas Golden Knights and the Colorado Avalanche. And this is going to be a matchup where you have 2 of the best rosters in the NHL competing hand to hand. But more importantly, this is a Colorado team that really wants to face Vegas. They have not gone up against each other in the Stanley Cup playoffs since 2021. So it's been a while since they've met in the playoffs. And I think Colorado and Vegas will have a lot of good back and forth here. And I'll be curious to see what happens in this matchup. Vancouver versus LA. Now, this is a matchup that I wouldn't have predicted to begin the year, but at last we are here. Vancouver, I like what we saw from them this season. The goaltending is doing well enough, and the defense is on all cylinders right now, where LA is a little bit suspect. Now, getting into the second round of the Western Conference, this is going to be a very controversial take, but it's my take nonetheless. Your Vegas Golden Knights will beat the Colorado Avalanche in 7 games. So back-to-back 7-game series, but your Vegas Golden Knights will persevere, and they will beat the Colorado Avalanche to advance to the Western Conference Finals. And then the Vancouver Canucks will put away LA in 6 games and move on to the Western Conference Finals. Now, in that situation, you have one of the best teams in the Pacific going up against your reigning, defending Stanley Cup champions. You have Vegas. You have Vancouver. This is going to be one of the best matchups we see all around. And this is going to be one of the best low-key series you are going to see in the playoffs. Now, what do I see happening here? What is the outcome? What is going to be the result of Vancouver versus Vegas in the Western Conference Finals? I have your Vegas Golden Knights for the 3rd time in the Stanley Cup playoffs, winning in 7 games. This is going to go 7, just like Colorado will go 7, just like Dallas will go 7. But your Vegas Golden Knights will persevere and beat Vancouver. And then your Stanley Cup final will be Carolina versus Vegas in the Stanley Cup final. That is our prediction here on Vegas Hockey Hub. Carolina, Vegas. In our Stanley Cup final prediction, folks, we have in 5 games your Vegas Golden Knights winning the Stanley Cup final, and that is what's going to be the reality here with this situation. And I do agree with you, by the way, when it comes to defensive depth, I do agree with you. And then you said, yes, Knights, yes, Knights, yes, Knights. And then if defense wins NHL playoffs with Pietrangelo back, go Knights, go. So this is Vegas Hockey Hub. I'm your host, Ian Rachiele. And until next time, go Knights, go.